You went into the conversation with one clear point. You had thought it through. You knew what you wanted to say. You were calm. You were reasonable. You were ready. And then, somewhere in the middle of it, you lost the thread. Not because you were wrong. Not because your point was unclear. But because the conversation itself seemed to dissolve around you, shifting, doubling back, expanding into territory you never intended to enter, swallowing the original subject entirely until you could no longer find it. By the time it was over, you were not discussing the thing you raised. You were defending yourself. You were apologizing. You were somehow the problem in a conversation you had started, because something was wrong. And they seemed fine. That is not an argument. That is something else entirely. And once you understand what it is, and why it happens, you will never walk into it the same way again. The term is word salad. And in the context of covert narcissistic relationships, it describes a very specific communication pattern, one that is designed, consciously or not, to prevent a conversation from ever arriving at a clear conclusion. It is not simply talking a lot. It is not confusion or poor communication skills. Word salad is the deliberate use of circular reasoning, contradiction, deflection, and non sequiturs to exhaust, disorient, and ultimately silence the person raising a concern. Here is how it works in practice. You raise a point. Instead of addressing it, they respond with something adjacent to your point. Something that sounds related, but is not quite an answer. You follow that thread, trying to stay engaged. They follow your follow-up with something else, another near answer, or a question about your motivations, or a reference to something that happened 6 months ago that has nothing to do with today. You try to bring it back. They go somewhere else. And before long, you are 3 conversations deep inside a conversation that was supposed to be about one thing. You are tracking multiple threads simultaneously. You are trying to respond to contradictions. You are losing your place. That disorientation is not a side effect of the conversation. It is the point of it. Let us look at the specific moves that make word salad work, because they are consistent across relationships, and recognizing them is the first step to not being captured by them. The first move is deflection. You raise a concern, and they respond by introducing something you did, said, or failed to do. The subject has not been addressed, it has been redirected. Now you are defending yourself instead of waiting for an answer. And the original concern sits untouched. The second move is contradiction. They say one thing. You respond to that thing. They then say something that contradicts what they just said, but frame it as clarification rather than reversal. If you point out the contradiction, that itself becomes a problem. You are twisting their words. You are not listening. You are being difficult. The third move is expansion. Your concern was specific, but they make it general. A conversation about one incident becomes a conversation about your patterns, your tendencies, your character. The specificity of what you raised dissolves into an abstract discussion about who you are as a person, which is far harder to argue and far easier for them to control. The fourth move is exhaustion. All of the above repeated. Cycling through the same points without resolution. Returning to contradictions without acknowledging them. Adding new threads before old ones are resolved. The goal, whether conscious or not, is to run you out of energy before any conclusion can be reached. And when you eventually stop, when you finally say fine, forget it, that reads as the argument ending. But it did not end. It was abandoned. And you are the one who walked away from it. There is a reason word salad works. It is not because you are slow or easily confused. It is because of how the human mind processes language and logic in real time. When someone gives you information, your brain is trying to do several things simultaneously. Track what is being said, evaluate whether it is true, hold the original subject in mind, and formulate a response. Under normal conditions, with a reasonable conversation partner, that is manageable. But word salad overwhelms that system deliberately. When contradictions come quickly, your brain has to hold both versions of a statement and try to reconcile them, which takes processing power away from everything else. When the subject shifts, you have to update your working model of the conversation, which takes more. When deflection introduces your own behavior as a counterpoint, you have to manage your emotional response to being accused while also trying to hold your original position. The cognitive load becomes impossible. And here is the piece that matters most. When your mind is overwhelmed and cannot reach a conclusion, the emotional experience is one of failure, of inadequacy, of not being able to think clearly, of being somehow less capable than the person across from you who seems perfectly composed. That feeling, that you are the confused one, the irrational one, the one who cannot follow the argument, is what they want you to leave with. Because if you believe that the problem is your reasoning, you will not trust your reasoning the next time you try to raise a concern. Word salad is particularly difficult to identify in covert narcissistic relationships because of how it is delivered. An overt narcissist may shout you down. They may dismiss you openly. The aggression is visible and you can name it, even if you cannot always respond to it. A covert narcissist does something more subtle. Their word salad often sounds reasonable. It is delivered calmly. It carries the tone of someone trying hard to communicate, trying to make you understand their perspective, trying to be thorough, trying to be fair. And so you try to match that register. You try to stay calm. You try to follow them. And by trying to follow them, you get lost. This is what makes it so disorienting. You cannot point to the moment it went wrong because every individual sentence sounded plausible. It is only when you step back and look at the whole conversation that you notice nothing was resolved. No question was answered directly. No concern was acknowledged and addressed. But you cannot always step back in the middle of a conversation. You are inside it. And inside it, everything feels like it is your fault for not keeping up. After a word salad argument, there is a particular kind of aftermath that people in these relationships describe consistently. It is not the aftermath of a normal disagreement, where you might feel frustrated or sad, but at least you know what was said and where things stand. This is different. You feel exhausted, but you cannot name what you are exhausted from. You feel like you lost something, but you cannot identify what. You feel a vague guilt that has no specific source, a sense that you were somehow in the wrong even though you cannot reconstruct exactly how that conclusion was reached. And then comes the replaying. That night, or the next morning, or for the next several days, you replay the conversation in your head. You try to find the moment where it shifted. You try to locate your error. You try to understand how something you raised with clarity became something you could not defend. That replaying is your mind trying to make sense of something that was deliberately designed not to make sense. You will not find the moment because there was no single moment. The confusion was built in, spread across the whole exchange, distributed so evenly that it left no clear target. And the covert narcissist, meanwhile, has moved on. They seem untroubled. They are not replaying anything, because they were never confused. There was nothing to untangle for them. That asymmetry, your exhaustion against their composure, is one of the most reliable signals that what you experienced was not a difficult conversation. It was a controlled one. The moment the pattern has a name, something shifts. Not immediately, not completely, but in a real and significant way. When you understand word salad, when you recognize the specific moves, the deflections, the contradictions, the expanding subject, the cycling without resolution, you begin to experience the conversation differently from the inside. You notice when the subject has shifted. You notice when a contradiction has been introduced. You notice when you are being moved from raising a concern to defending your character. And noticing is the beginning of not being captured by it. This does not mean you can necessarily fix the conversation in the moment. These patterns are deeply ingrained. The person using them has been using them, consciously or unconsciously, for a very long time, across many relationships, and they are practiced at them in a way you are not practiced at recognizing them. But you can change your participation. You can say, I am going back to the original point. You can say, that is a separate conversation. Right now I am asking about this. You can say, I notice we have moved away from what I raised. I need to return to it, not with anger, not as an accusation, simply as a navigation, a refusal to be carried off course. And if they cannot stay on the original point, if every attempt to return to a clear question is met with another deflection, another expansion, another circular move that takes you further from where you started, then you have learned something important. Not that the argument was impossible, that the argument was never intended to resolve. When people come through this and look back at the word salad arguments they survived, sometimes hundreds of them, across years, they describe something that is part relief and part grief. The relief is this: I was not losing my mind. I was not bad at arguing. I was not irrational or confused or incapable. I was responding to something that was specifically designed to produce those feelings in me. The grief is this: the person I believed was trying to understand me was not. The conversations I thought were hard because we were different were hard because one of us was not trying to arrive at understanding at all. That grief is real, and it deserves to be taken seriously. But underneath the grief, there is something else. Something solid. There is the return of your own voice. The sense that your perceptions are reliable. The experience of a thought completing itself cleanly without being interrupted and dismantled before it reaches its end. You begin to trust your reasoning again. And that trust, that quiet, steady confidence in your own mind, is something that word salad was specifically designed to take from you. The fact that you are here. The fact that you are listening to this and recognizing it. The fact that you are naming what happened rather than burying it further in confusion. That is the beginning of getting it back. If this video describes something you have lived inside, take a moment with that recognition. You are not the confused one. You were made to feel confused. Those are not the same thing. In the next video, we are going to look at a pattern that often runs alongside word salad, narcissistic rage. The disproportionate explosion that seems to come from nowhere, the way it is used to shut down exactly the kind of clear thinking this video is about, and what it reveals about the psychology driving all of it. If you want to understand that, and I think you do, make sure you are subscribed so you do not miss it. And if this video gave you language for something you have been carrying without words, share it with someone who is still inside it. You might be giving them the first clear thing they have heard in a very long time. Take care of yourself. I will see you in the next one.